It's another day to talk about the FIFA World Cup, where the FIFA World Cup is getting into the final stage. Four remaining teams will slug it out to see who would win the main tournament, the biggest trophy when it comes to football in the world. Welcome to the FIFA Roundup Show on Atlantic TV. My name is Richard Unwaje. On the show today, we'll talk about what's happening around the quarterfinals game, building up to the semifinals game, the last four. We call them the big four teams, the big four countries when it comes to world football still remaining around the World Cup. We'll talk about them today. We'll talk about what's happening around something interesting around what's trending as usual. And we have Pooja, who is waiting for us all the way in Atlanta, where he will join us on the show. We'll talk about the big issues around the FIFA World Cup. Welcome to the show. It's Atlantic TV. Thank you for joining us on the World FIFA World Cup Roundup show on Atlantic TV. All right, let's go into what we have today, and let's start up with let's go on to what happened in the quarterfinals game. And men will let's start from that Friday game, a very interesting game where we had Spain and Belgium play what many called a very interesting game. The Belgian team tried their best. The Spanish team were stronger to win that particular game. We spoke about it on the show on Friday. And, Pooja and, of course, me and myself were talking about the fact that we believe that the Spanish team are stronger when it comes to football. And it just happened that way. Now, looking at other games that played, the game, of course, that our own very correspondent, Pooja, was covering in Miami at the game between Norway and England. It was a very tough and very interesting game where we saw Norway taking the lead, and England pushed one back thanks to Jude Bellingham on that goal they gave from Jude Bellingham, and ended 2-1. Very, very interesting game, moved to extra time and everything, but with a lot of controversy around that particular game. But it was one interesting game that pushed England to the semi-finals and, of course, got them close to where they were in about 8 years ago. Yeah, so look back at when last do we see England at the semis, and we'll look back at how many years ago we got them at the semis last. Now, we also had a very interesting game between Argentina and Switzerland. It's moving to extra time, giving us what we call the normal, quarterfinals vibes, yeah, if I can use that word, where Argentina pulled that very strong one, won that game by 3-1. No one saw Argentina scoring 3 goals, but everybody talking about Lautaro Martinez's beautiful goal he scored in that particular game. Many talking about Messi and how Messi is contributing to that team, and many will talk about the Argentina team and look back at the fact that the Argentina team in the last World Cup, they were at the finals. Men will look back at them in 2014, where they got to the finals also, and look at the last 4 editions and say that they have been this kind of consistency with the Argentine team. Maybe some will look at and say, okay, in 2018 they were not there, but the fact that they have improved, playing the finals last call it FIFA World Cup, and this particular FIFA World Cup, they've got to the semi-finals, and semi-finals is a very, very interesting one because if you don't win, you come second. If you don't come second, you come third. If you don't come third, you come fourth. So it's really, really arranged in a very special way that we'll know who would come first, who might come first, second, third, and fourth. Now let's look at the fixtures we have. It's a very interesting one already. The Argentine fans are already celebrating. Some will say, no, it's not that way. But France again will play against Spain, a very tough game where the French team who won the World Cup in 2018. In 2022, they were the runners-up. Will play against the Spanish team, a youthful team coming up, and that game will happen, of course, on Tuesday, 14th of July, around talk about 2 o'clock Dallas local time. That'll be around 8 p.m. Nigerian time. Also, the very interesting game between Argentina, where Argentina will go against England. A very interesting game, which many will see. Many will look back at the Three Lions and look back at 1966 when they won. They'll call it the World Cup, and many will talk about the fact whether it is coming home. Don't forget, in every tournament, whether it's the Euros or the World Cup, the English team, the Three Lions, many will call them, are always favorites to win the tournament. But most times, it does not just go as we expect. They're going against the current champions, Argentina, which is built around one strong man they call Messi. Yes, Messi is the will I call him the engine of the Argentina national team, and going against the Three Lions, it will be a very tough game. But I think England fans might just be really, really, maybe satisfied so far with what they have seen. But to talk about the England team, because someone watched that game live, he didn't just watch the game, he was at the important point where only few journalists have the chance to get to talk about when he took those big pictures Someone says the pitch side. Some will say that's the most important side. Yes, talk about Pooja. Pooja was at the pitch side covering that particular game. And of course, he has insight into that game and insight into the England team and the Argentina team. Now, joining us all the way from Atlanta is nobody else but our own very own correspondent on Atlantic TV covering the FIFA World Cup happening in Mexico, USA, and Canada. Talk about the man they call Pooja. All right, top of the morning to you, Pooja. Pooja, how are you doing this morning?
Well, I'm good. And I shouldn't be on the show because I'm trying to relax. I'm trying to, trying to get my strength back. I've been a bit under the weather. It has been crazy for me this week. This week I've been to Miami twice. I've been to New Jersey. I've been to, back to Atlanta 2 times. So I've traveled for like 15 hours combined. So, but of course, when duty calls, you have to come on board. So let's do the business. The big one is coming this week, and of course the final on Sunday. So let's see who's gonna win the World Cup 2026.
About being the final week of the World Cup with countdown to the finals on the 19th. Now, let's talk about something very interesting. Let's talk about the English team. Yes, they won that game, but something very interesting around the England national team is the man they call Jude Bellingham. Now, Jude Bellingham has been, he has been criticized of his lack of inconsistency, but most of us will look back at him, look at 2 seasons ago, when he moved to Real Madrid and around the found the fact that he was being tipped to win the Ballon d'Or at one particular time. Now, Jude Bellingham has now showed himself well, in the World Cup. In the last game they played, he scored 2 goals, and he's consistent. And I watched the interview you had where a particular English fan spoke around the fact that he's the best midfielder right now in the tournament. Now, would you share that sentiment and say Jude Bellingham is the best midfielder, or is one of those players that nobody expected to see do well and he's doing well currently?
Well, I think for Jude Bellingham, he has been long coming. Right from when he was at Dortmund. Remember, when Tuchel took over, he said Jude Bellingham is one of his key players, but he would not call him because he just recovered from injury because he was suffering a shoulder injury when Tuchel got the job. So the potential has always been there. You can't spend, Real Madrid can spend over £100 million for a player who is not talented. But at this World Cup, without missing words, is the best midfielder. You can't score 6 goals, carry your team, to the semi-final, last 4 teams at the World Cup, and someone will be discussing about who is the best midfielder. Of course, we have good midfielders still at in the competition. We have Messi is now a midfielder. We look at it, we have Olise, maybe a midfielder. We have Pedri, but in terms of impact, in terms of what he has done, scoring goals all through the knockout phases, I think Jude Bellingham is currently the best player per the World Cup, not holistically, coming from the league and now the World Cup, but based on the World Cup, he's gunning for the golden ball. Of course, 6 goals from a midfielder is not a joke at this World Cup that is coming thick and fast. So for Jude Bellingham, a wonderful World Cup so far for him. I believe he's going to continue like that and maybe bring the cup home for England. But so far so good. I think he's the best midfielder at the World Cup.
Now, talk about best midfielder. Let's just move because we have a lot to talk about today. Let's move and talk about the Spanish team and one man they call Yamal. Now, Yamal, 19 years today, celebrating Yamal, a young talent, that have done so well for himself and everything. But, many will talk about Yamal's performance in the World Cup, and many will say Yamal there was a lot of hype before the tournament around what Yamal would do. And in every game, the Spanish team still put him forward as their main man. Now, from your own perspective, do you think Yamal has lived up to expectation based on what many football fans expected from him before 11th of July 2026?
Well, unfortunately for Lami Yamal, he got injured before the World Cup, and he entered the World Cup with injury. Remember, he didn't play the first match. He didn't start the first match. He entered in the second half against Cape Verde, and he showed that he was still, trying to get his fitness because he was injured for like 2, 3 weeks before the World Cup. And I think, people overlook injuries to these players like it's just a joke. It's not a joke. Injuries will stop or redeem. You have to now, get your rhythm back. After getting your rhythm, you now have to now walk back to form. And that's what happened to Jude Bellingham. Last season in the La Liga, it wasn't really the Jude Bellingham we know because he was coming out of injury. But number of games, got his rhythm back, and he's got the form at the World Cup. Unfortunately for Lamine Yamal, he got injured. He was out for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks before the World Cup, and he's now just starting to keep up. And of course, we saw what he did against Portugal. It shows that he's coming out of shape. It shows that he's coming out of rhythm. The fitness is coming back, and maybe we are going to see the Lamine Yamal. Everyone, including myself, we're expecting at this World Cup. So far so good. He has a good one for him. But of course, celebrating your birthday, your next 19th birthday, at the World Cup could actually be a catalyst for you to perform. So let's expect that you see a good game against France. And he has been talking tough as well. He has been saying, they can beat France. And when you see someone like that, who we've seen in a couple of games now that he's getting his fitness back, I think we are going to see the Lamine Yamal everyone is expected at this World Cup.
Now, I'll talk about Yamal. Let's talk about the semi-final games, and one of those games, game you just highlighted just now, the game between France and Spain. Now, many are talking about the French national team when it comes to scoring goals. The fact that yes, they are scoring goals very, very well. You have Mbappe, you have Dembele, you have Olise behind creating the chances for there. So I'm talking about the Spanish team. I'm talking about the fact that Spanish team have one great, attribute so far into this tournament, which will be their defensive abilities. Now, looking at these two teams coming against themselves, if you have to put your money any of them based on what they have played so far, which of the teams do you think will sneak itself into the finals of the World Cup?
Spain France is going to be a very complex game because we have teams playing two different kind of football. We have the Spanish side who are playing possession football. They have in all the games they play, they've enjoyed more possession than any other team, and they just considered their first goal at this World Cup, against in their last game. So it shows that they can go, they can block and they can play well. But we've seen we've seen the two sides of France. France can play good football, they can play very entertaining football, and they can play very deadly football like we saw against Paraguay. So we are seeing a team that can hold themselves, and of course, for Spain, they have a bit of hedge against France because they've defeated France back to back in major tournaments now. So I think that will set like a psychology for France. But don't take anything away from this France. They've been the better side at this tournament. They've blown teams away. Look at what they did at the quarterfinal against Morocco. It was so easy for them that they didn't eat top gear. So for Spain, I think, like I said, we want to see the Lamine Yamal we all wanted to see. We want to see a very interesting game. Olise like 5 assists. We have Dembele with 4 goals. We have Mbappe with 8 goals. So how can they contain a side who score a lot of goals against a very, very deep, defensive side? So it's a game of two teams, well rooted in the attacking side and a very defensive side, talking about Spain, who have contained just 1 goal at this tournament. So it's very complex, but I think, for France, they have a bit of depth in their squad more than Spain to go all the way if we get to the later part of this of the game. So I'm tipping France, but it's not going to be a very easy game for them because Spain are European champions and they know how to beat France.
I'll talk about European champions and how to beat France. Now let's talk about something interesting. England. Will it come home? That's a popular phrase they normally use to talk about England winning the World Cup. Now England struggling to win a major title for several years. Several years. They've changed coaches, they've gotten the best of players, and some say, oh, they could not do that with the likes of David Beckham, Lampard, John Terry. We're looking at this particular England team going against the current champions, Argentina. Argentina are fired up with Messi in their team. Do you think England can be able to conquer Argentina?
Well, I think England fans and England, board of directors or maybe the officials have come to realize that they can't play in their own way anymore. They've tried to play the English way, getting Southgate, but now they have to play in a pattern that they have to win titles. You have to win, because when you are not winning your major titles since 1960 or 1966, it's a very long time, and you have to dish your heritage, your culture, your pattern, your philosophy to win something. And that's what Arsenal did with Arteta. Leave all this entertainment football under Wenger because we want to win major trophies. And they were a very dark team. in terms of formation and tactics, during the Premier League. And they won, the Premier League after almost 20 years. So if you look at England as well, I think they are humble to give Tuchel this job because Tuchel is a tournament manager and he doesn't play all those sexy football. You saw the game against Norway when they were trying to block shot. He brought on Dan Bonds for as a substitute to block shot. So it's a kind of manager that is not their philosophy. But if you look at Argentina, Argentina is a team made of Messi. Messi is the fear factor. And if you're not careful, Messi will hurt you. Messi will create the assist. Messi will get the goals. Remember, he got an assist against Switzerland in that game as well, which people said it was very quiet. But being quiet, he still got an assist. And that's very key. Assists and goals make up is that they are currencies when you want to win tournaments or even games. So Messi is actually a big factor. Argentina, they are not really a good a good side like England, but it's the semi-final. They have the most, I would say for Argentina and France, they have the most experienced side, because they got to the final last edition in 2022, and most of these players are still with the squad. 4 years experience. You have played in semi-final before. For England, this is the first time they'll be in the semi-final at the World Cup. After I think Russia 2018. So it's a big game. But if Bellingham continue this form, if Harry Kane continue this form, both of them have scored over, 10 goals combined. And if Messi, continue this game, it's going to be a game with a lot of goals. But I think England are well rooted. They are well drilled enough to get a win against Argentina.
England to beat Argentina, that would be a very, very, that prediction, many will be surprised that you will go that way, but you believe that England can beat Argentina and get to the finals. Now, let's bring it home from there. Now, over the weekend, the show on Friday was trending, a particular topic we raised around, stadium and everything. But no, we've all agreed that Nigeria have had this regression when it comes to football in the last, maybe some would say since year 2000, some would say since 2002. Now, who should we blame for Nigerians' let's say regression, the fact that they've not been able to make any major progress in the last years? Who should we blame? Should we blame the government? Should we blame private sectors that have refused maybe to invest in football? Should we blame it on talent? Should we blame it on corruption? What do you think is the major problem of Nigerian football? We're not at the World Cup, but we might be at the next World Cup. But what do you think is the major problem?
Funny enough, we cannot blame sponsors or investors. If you don't fix your house, there's no way sponsors will come on board, and that is left for the house to be fixed. And who are going to fix? Who are the people that are going to fix the house? It's the federal government, and it's not through the federal government. Federal government, we have to give it to the Ministry of Sport then, and now that we have National Sports Commission, they are saddled with responsibility to fix our sports, not just football. So, but if we streamline it to football, that means we have not structurally fixed our home to attract sponsors and to attract the best talents, to play for us. Remember, when Pinnick was there, he was going around to look for, the likes of Tammy Abraham, likes of Eberieze, which they turn him down. So it shows that we've not fixed our home well for us to attract this talent. Look at Morocco. They have one of the best league in the world, and their team is made up of foreign, based players born outside Morocco because their home is very, very good. And I don't know, just recently, this week, there was a report that came out that they are building one of the biggest stadium in the world for the 2030 World Cup. And it's going to, get over 100,000 people to watch a particular World Cup game in a stadium, talking about the World Cup final. So the look at Morocco, the federation is doing well, and it's attracting talent and sponsors as well. So if we fail to fix our house, and they will not attract any, and will not qualify for major tournaments. And I think we should give the new set of leadership at the National Sports Commission a slack, because now they are doing sports reform. Now they are going to the NPFL, which of course is is the baseline to produce talent for the league and talent for the and for the national team. And now they are talking about the 8th grade teams. They are doing well. Now that the Super Falcons are going for the WAFCON, they've resumed training camp in Casablanca. 10 days to the to the tournament. This is the first time it will happen. So it looks like things are going well, with this new set of leadership at the National Sports Commission. If you continue on this regard, and we have a good league, we have a good national team, we have good infrastructural development in terms of building, because they are from the reforms, they said they are trying to renovate most of the stadium to world standards. So if we continue in this trajectory and we take our national team seriously, now we have a bit of stability. Eric Chell is going to get another deal and it's going to take us through the qualifiers to the Nations Cup next year, and we start the World Cup qualifiers for the 2030 World Cup. So if we fix our house, we attract talent, we attract the best sponsors and investors, and of course the fans, the journalists, we enjoy what is going on in Nigerian football.
Now, talking about what's going on in Nigerian football. Now, if we use Morocco as a case study, how Morocco had a 15 years plan, we had Germany having a 10 years plan, and all these countries were intentional about fixing their sports in sports in their countries. Now, if Nigeria want to have a plan or decide to have a plan, how many years plan do you think Nigeria should adopt? And do you think with that plan, if it's properly followed, we can be able to at least, first of all, at least compete with Morocco when it comes to sports infrastructure?
That we enjoyed a bit of because let's streamline it to Super Eagles because it's a very broad topic. But for Super Eagles, we enjoyed a bit of stability in the for like 6 years when we got Gennett Raw. For that stability, we got to the semi-final of AFCON. We qualified to the AFCON with a game to spare. We qualified for the World Cup with a game to spare. So that 6 years, we enjoyed a bit of stability. And again, we played World Cup qualifiers in Lagos. We played in Asaba. We played in Uyo. That means those stadiums, as at that time, are standard enough for FIFA to approve them. So that 6 years, that we had a bit of stability, we enjoy football, we enjoy growth. And that's, streamlined down to the cadet team because if your senior team is doing well, that means, there will be graduation from the under-8 teams to the senior level. And we enjoy that. But since, we've been changing managers back to back, from Posero to Finidi George. Now we are having a bit of stability with Eric Chell. And if you continue in this regard, in terms of having a philosophy with him, and he said something very germane as well. He said he wants to spend better time with the Super Eagles. That is why he's taking over the under 23 teams because the next funnel to produce talent for the senior team is the under 23. And remember, we've not qualified for the Olympics in the last 2 editions. That is in the last 8 years. So it's coming down to where the talents are to promote them to the senior level. So if you do that in terms of talent, the National Sports Commission, who is saddled with responsibility to take care of sport and football in Nigeria, can now focus on administration and infrastructure. So if they continue that, and because they said they are doing sport reform, it has been everywhere in the last past week. So if they focus on building stadium, renovating stadium, and the Super Eagles have a bit of stability that will trickle down to the under-8 teams, that means we have a good football, heritage going forward. So if you say in the next 10 years, because again, there's a bit of instability because if the current presidency fail to win a second term, that means we are going to have a cut short because we have another government, another regime, and it will bring another kind of people to be in our sports. So if we have a bit of stability with Eric Chell, with this leadership of the National Sports Commission, I think the next 10 years it won't be like Morocco. But of course, we go back to the old days when we are qualifying for tournaments. We are using several stadiums for our World Cup qualifiers, and of course, we are producing talent from the under-8 teams down to the senior level.
Now we're looking at 10 years. Now, talking about 10 years and something finally on the final note today, FIFA plan to increase the number of teams participating in the World Cup. And some Nigerians are happy and say at least anyhow Nigeria will qualify. Anyway, Nigeria will qualify now from 48 to 64. Next World Cup 2030 hosted by Morocco, Spain, and Portugal. Now, do you think that is a right decision from FIFA? Do you think FIFA being too commercial? Should we allow every country in the world to have a chance to play in the World Cup? Or we should stick to our 48? Or we go back to 32? What do you think?
Fans are a bit funny because if you are part of the national team, this is what you'll be agitating for. When you have over 200 members, when it comes to FIFA, and you want to just have maybe 48 teams out of over 200 teams to qualify for the World Cup. After every year, after every 4 years, we are not playing this tournament every year, so that means we have 4 years to plan. And one thing that comes with 68 teams is that we will not have best losers. Look at what happened at this World Cup. We have eight best losers. And we have teams that drew three times and they were in the round of 32. We will not have that when it's 64, when it's 64 teams rather. Because the best two teams from each group will qualify for the round of 32. And that makes it more competitive. That makes it, more interesting. And again, you can't just close shop and say, okay, you just want 48 teams when over 200 teams are competing for qualifiers. So I think what FIFA they are trying to do is to open the avenue for teams to qualify. And when it gets to the World Cup, it will be more competitive because at the end of the day, we will not have best losers to now qualify for round of 32. We have proper, so that means you cannot play all those games. See the games in the round of in the group stage. The third games were so watery. Teams are looking for draws. Teams are not playing well. Teams are because they know that they've qualified. Because they know that if they don't qualify as best two, they will be among the best eight losers. So we don't want best losers anymore. So if they pass this in their their meeting, their governing meeting later on this year, and we have 64 teams, I think it's better for football. It's better for national team that history. We look at Curacao, look at Cape Verde. Those are the stories that we want to hear. Let's see teams. Look at Haiti. Look at Saudi Arabia. If this team is just close shop, with the big boys in football, we don't have this kind of stories. We don't have this kind of revelation. And look at the Cape Verde goalkeeper. Look at Curacao. Who know that Curacao will come for this tournament? So we want to see the likes of Lebanon, likes of San Marino at the World Cup. Because if they go through the World Cup qualifiers and they qualify, they are deemed fit to be at the World Cup. So it's not about the FIFA ranking. It's about qualifying. And if they feel like 64 will be better, I think I'll go in that direction.
All right, 64 teams in the World Cup, and we'll see how that will happen. Thank you very much, Pooja, for joining us this morning all the way from Atlanta. Of course, you need to get some rest. We have to rest tomorrow. We're preparing for the England-Argentina game, which is on that game which you'll be covering there in Atlanta. Of course, Pooja, who is our correspondent there in Atlanta, covering the World Cup. All right, let's move from there. Let's talk about what's happening. Yes, what we just spoke about some few minutes ago, the expansion of the World Cup. Now, the FIFA president is given the option that the World Cup will be expanded in 2030 when the World Cup will be hosted by three different nations. Now, Spain, Portugal, and Morocco would host the next World Cup in 2030. The FIFA president, Fatino, believes that the World Cup would be more competitive if it's expanded. Now, that is still under deliberation. And for many people, this will be one topic that would be very, very controversial if the World Cup should be expanded or it should remain in its current shape, where we have just 48 teams. Let's see what will happen around that. Now, still talking about what's happening around the World Cup. Now, let's move from that and let's talk about our man of the day. We're celebrating Messi today. Yeah, Messi, super player, what always celebrating, and when we're talking about the fact that Messi just keeps writing his name on gold when it comes to football, and helping the team. He did not score a goal, giving an assist, and they are set to be at the semi-finals. And someone was saying the last three editions they have played in semi-finals. The last four editions they played in semi-finals three different times, which is a great one for the Argentine team. And some are calling this World Cup Messi's last dance. But Messi keeps proving himself. And today on the show, we celebrate the man they call Messi. And for Messi, let's look at our table. We are looking down at the countdown and looking at the goals. We're counting down the goals in the Golden Boot chase. Now, the question is, who would win the Golden Boot for the 2026 World Cup happening in Canada, Mexico, and USA? And of course, Kylian Mbappe is on the top of our list right now, where Mbappe has 8 goals. Now, everybody is celebrating Mbappe with his great performance. Argentina are pulling something very, very strong with Messi, who has 8 goals. Also, too, with Mbappe, Aaron Haaland, 7 goals, and Mbappe is 8 on top because if they are to give the Golden Boot now, Mbappe will get it due to assist and his assist. That would help him push for that one. Aaron Haaland, 7 goals, beautiful one for Aaron Haaland. And the interesting part is that these guys are still in tournaments. Harry Kane, 6 goals. Jude Bellingham, 6 goals. Is still in the tournament. So it's a very, very interesting one. The fact that this guy is in the tournament and they will still pull through. Dembele, 5 goals, still in tournament. Interesting one. So I think as we're following up the results, another interesting part will be the Golden Boot chase. And for many people, we would keep our fingers crossed and see what will happen to the last day of the tournament, where many believe that will decide who will definitely win the Golden Boots. All right, from what's happened around the Golden Boots, let's go to my favorite part of the show where we go to what is trending. Now, the World Cup has a very beautiful way of giving us that very, very, very interesting thing. Call it the fact that the World Cup, beyond the whole razzmatazz on the field, we have what happens outside the field. And let's look at what is trending today. And let us start off with something that happened in, call it in the Spain training ground where some fans went to say hi to this particular man they call Yamal. He's 19. We're celebrating Yamal today also too. 19 years in the World Cup, and he scored so many goals. And look at add 19 years to the years of Messi, of Ronaldo, that's like 20 years or 21 more years of football. But we always celebrate Yamal, great talent, a real great talent. And of course, his humility in this particular video caught my attention in a way. He had to sign a token for these young stars. And for many, this is just beautiful. I think Yamal has a lot of years to play football, and that is the joy of most of us. The fact that Yamal will dominate the game for a very, very long time. Yeah, with what we are seeing, and we just wish him well. And his the fact that someone has spoken the oh, he's too proud or whatever. I'll say, come he's still a young guy, he's still a teenager. And how many teenagers had the chance to play the World Cup at this particular age? Some would say very, very few. So we must always celebrate what this man comes with, or this boy comes with, or you want to call teenager, Yamal comes with. We must always celebrate him. All right, from what's happened around Yamal, let's talk about something very interesting. Our Friday show on the FIFA Roundup show on the Atlantic TV got many, many people talking. Now, someone is wondering, yes, it was all over social media where different blogs spoke about something interesting we spoke about with Pooja, and that was when we spoke about, Nigeria and how Nigeria is prepared, when Nigeria is prepared to host the World Cup, and whether our stadia in our different stadia in Nigeria can be able to host the tournament. And this got many people talking, and this has been trending on social media. Now let's watch a bit of that video, and when we come back, and we would then look at some tweets that, of course, that flowed up in that particular video. Now, what is your take home from what you have seen so far in terms of Nigeria? Now, how do you think we can take our football in Nigeria to the next level based on what you have seen in terms of infrastructure, the kind of the different stadia you have seen in different parts of USA you've been? What do you think? What do you think is your own major take home, and what do you think Nigeria can be able to implement if we were to have a one-on-one with the head of the sports commission? What would you be telling him?
Okay, Nigerian football is split into two different perspective. I think infrastructure wise, and of course performance wise when we talk about the Super Eagles. So for the infrastructure, I think we have a long way to go. I don't think there's no stadium. I stand to be corrected that can host the World Cup, the World Cup in Nigeria. No, even Uyo cannot, because if you want to host the World Cup, Uyo could be the main center, main media center for maybe accreditation and journalists, or where the final is going to take place. And the facility in Uyo Stadium is like 20% to the facility in either Atlanta Stadium or even the New Jersey Stadium. So you are looking at a whole, a whole infrastructural development in Nigeria, and that is only Uyo. There's no other stadium in Nigeria that can host any game at the World Cup. So what the NLC or what
causing a lot of debate around whether it's true, but many of us who know what the World Cup stands for will tell you the fact that for you to host the World Cup match, you must have 40,000 seater stadium. First of all, have 40,000 seaters before you can host the World Cup. And when you progress to knockout stage, they use larger stadium stadia. So in other words, that means Nigeria must at least have like 12 different stadia with at least 60,000 and above. And then we'll then talk about whether they are up to FIFA standards. Now, the particular Uyo Stadium, which many people are talking about, I've been to Uyo several times. Uyo sees 30,000, which is still short of FIFA's FIFA's standard for a FIFA stadium. The only what Uyo could only that is a gospel public stadium. Uyo could only go in for a CAF qualifiers, but not a FIFA. Talk about a FIFA main tournament to hold something like a FIFA World Cup, and that's talking about the we call it deficit we have in infrastructure in Nigeria. Let's look at some tweets that we got to know from that particular video. Of course, really, really trending. A lot of people seeing a lot of stuff, and this is from Miss Kel. Yeah, if I got it right, no be lying now. This is the absolute truth. Make nobody sugarcoat them. All right, so looking at tweets that we got from that one, bro. It is the same Nigeria that all of us is staying, or which one? when they are about hosting something, do you think they are just only majorly going to talking about housing? Bros, which road players want pass, go to the stadium, go play the ball, if at all there is going to be a good football pitch around. So talking about, we don't even have good roads beyond the pitch. We have bad roads. Now let's look at the last tweet we have for today. And in Greece picks the host World Cup. We 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 may still they drag with bandits. Of course, I'm talking about the fact that we have a lot of insecurity in the country and we are nowhere near hosting a major tournament as the World Cup. That's why I had to ask Pooja and say, how long? And Pooja is saying if we can invest in the next 10 years, maybe Nigeria could be up there trying to compete and see how they can get hosting rights to host a major international tournament. We keep our fingers crossed and we always, as usual, wish the best to those countries